Hello and good evening, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101, the Monday evening hindsight edition. We're getting off to a late start because of all the stuff that has been going on today. Um, the WhatsApp being down, Facebook being down, and all the technical stuff. But here we are um, with an abbreviated program. Our topic today is, of course, Irfan Ali again. Last week, we caught him lying. Um, we caught him lying. Okay, here we go again. Stops and starts tonight. Welcome everyone. Welcome to you if you're joining us from Guyana or the Caribbean or North America or Europe. Welcome to today's edition. As I was saying, last week we dealt with Mr. Irfan Ali, our president, and we caught him lying, saying that he did not know anything about extrajudicial killings in Guyana. And this week, the man has made the news again. He seems to be making the news for all the wrong reasons. This week, the man has now become an expert on the question of arson. As you know, the Bridam police station was burned down without waiting to hear from his security people without waiting for the dust to settle, without an investigation. The man came out and said that he believes it was arson, and he believes it had something to do with what was said by some people in New York. I don't know what he was talking about in relation to New York. I don't know what he was talking about, but the man came to the conclusion mere hours after the fire that it was arson and that it was committed by opposition elements in New York, or at least it was directed by people in New York. Now, this is the president of the president of Guyana. How can you be so reckless? How can you be so reckless? You're pronouncing on a very important development without the luxury intelligence, without waiting for an investigation. You decided that this was opposition elements in New York were behind. Of course, hours later, or a short time later, apparently a prisoner who was detained at Brickdam admitted that he set the place ablaze. We have not heard from the president since then. He has not apologized to the nation. He has not said anything. But this is the quality or lack thereof leadership of the country that we have. This is most embarrassing. It is most embarrassing. If you were the president, you can't behave as if you're at a street corner and carrying on that you know it was arson and you know who was behind it. That is unacceptable from the head of state and head of government of a country. But worse than that, President Ali went on to berate the members of the fire service and to accuse them of dragging their feet, that he was disappointed with the response of the fire service, suggesting that members of the fire service were part of this big conspiracy, to burn down the Brickdam police station. And he went on to threaten them. So here he is saying the place was burned down as a result of arson, and that people in New York, opposition elements in New York, are responsible. And then he goes on to accuse the fire service of poor quality of response, maybe suggesting that they were part of this conspiracy. And worse yet, to threaten members of the Guyana fire service. No, one has to be concerned about the quality of leadership. Last week, we had him lying in public about something that every person who has been following the news in Guyana knows that is true, that extrajudicial killing was very much part of the PPP's governance. And then this week, he jumps the gun. So this is a president who is itching to get at the opposition. Because if you are charging people with arson, then you are charging them with locking them up, charging them and pulling them before the court. Or maybe killing them as you did with Orrin Boston. That's what we are in the face of. We're in the face of a president, the head of a government, the head of state, who is now the investigator, the police, the courts, and the jury. He's deciding, maybe looking into a crystal ball, who is committing crime. This is a very serious development. This is a very serious development because it exposes a mindset. And the mindset is that you want to criminalize the opposition. It's a hint of where the PPP is going. That they are going to govern by trumped-up charges against the opposition. We have to be concerned. We have to be concerned. Now, if the person who was locked up at the police station there did not come out and admit that he set the place on fire, then the president was indeed hinting to the police who to go after. This is very serious. Some of us have lived through that kind of governance. You're not waiting for the police to do their work. You are telling the police who you think are guilty of this offense. And in a place where police are directed by the political directorate, you are indeed telling the police who to go and investigate. This is serious. And I want all of us to become alert to it. It's a method of governance. I have seen it before. I've heard it before. This is not a laughing matter. It's not a joking matter. It's a very serious matter. That this government has decided that it is now going to move towards criminalizing members of the opposition. And then worse yet, the man goes on to attack members of the fire service and to threaten them. Now we know that once they came to office last year, the head of the fire service, but not the head of the fire service, the head of the prison service was sent to some desk job. I understand that at the fire service itself, they made some moves there, put people in position. That all these institutions, as soon as they came to power last year, they shuffled around the leadership. And now you are indicting as the head of state. This is the head of state, this is the head of government. When he speaks with the institution of the government behind him. This is not an ordinary citizen. And when you do that, you are influencing how the police acts. You're influencing what's going on in the fire service. You're threatening people in the fire service. This is governance by bullying. This is authoritarian. Somebody's asking in the audience here, where are the guardians of democracy? And you're right, where are the guardians of democracy? Democracy says that if something happens in a nation, if you have a big fire at a central police station, that is a national matter. That's a serious matter. This is one of the main police stations. Ivleri and Brigdam are what we know as the two main police stations. If you have a fire at a place like that, it is a matter of national importance. It's a serious offense. You want to have the police do an investigation. You do not, as president, come out, preempt the police investigation, and say who you think is guilty. If that is not a violation of democracy, then I don't know what is. And then you go at the fire service. No, I don't know what caused the fire service not to move with the kind of haste that the president thinks that they should have moved with. Since I was a boy, I've always known that, people have always charged the fire service with coming too late and all that kind of stuff. But here is the head of state suggesting that members of the fire service might have been part of this conspiracy that is hatched in New York that he's talking about, and threatening them that he would go after them. Heads will roll. I am saying here this evening, sounding the warning that that scenario that played out there yesterday is a hint of things to come. How do we not know that the government will send its agents, its goons, to go burn places down? The president then tells the police it's the opposition who burn this place down and go and lock them up. That is what we have to look out for now. That they are going to have their phantom people commit offenses and the president will say who's guilty. We have to sound the bell loud. That is how authoritarian governments operate. And the president showed his hand yesterday. Showed his hand. Mere hours. You're the head of state. Wait for an investigation. Even if you suspect that the opposition may be behind it, wait. But instead of waiting, the president has decided that people are guilty. And so, one day, almost 24 hours after, we have not heard from the president. He has not walked back that statement. This is the quality of governance that we have in Guyana. No, we did not win our independence for this kind of governance. Even if one is anti-PPP, as some of us are, this is more than just being anti-PPP. This is a cause for concern. Would you imagine Mr. Granger? A fire happens and he comes out and charges the opposition. So whatever we may think about Mr. Granger, and he has his detractors, but none of us would expect that quality of governance from our head of state. Mr. Granger would not operate like that. He was there for 5 years. We didn't hear him with that kind of nonsense. But it's a nonsense that we have to take seriously, because these people are intent on locking up the opposition, jailing the opposition, shooting down people. They are governing with an iron fist. This weekend I said in my column in the Village Voice, and if you have not read the Village Voice, there may still be copies on the stand if you're in Guyana. And so for those of you who are overseas, you can go to the Village Voice website, and the contents of the paper are there. And I said in my column this weekend that I am convinced that the PPP has absolutely no interest in cooperating with the opposition. It has absolutely no interest in recognizing the constitutional role of the opposition. It wants to govern by itself. It wants to govern without accountability. And in the process, it wants to diminish those people who have not voted, did not vote for them last year. They want to diminish the representation for those people. I have observed governments in Guyana in the past. All governments in Guyana, except for the coalition government, showed their hand as far as authoritarianism is concerned. I've argued that the coalition government was the first and only government in our post-colonial experience in which violation of human rights was not normative. There were people, opposition elements were not hauled into the lockups. No one was charged with treason. Nobody was assassinated. People were not beaten on the streets when they came out to protest. None of that happened under the coalition government. And that is remarkable, because in our post-colonial experience, it represented an exception to the rule. And so it is very easy to spot this PPP government and its dictatorial intent, because you are juxtaposing what they're doing against the immediate past government. The gap is wide. And so this PPP has absolutely no intention, and it is banking on three things. One, it is banking on the fact that the opposition is immobilized, is divided, is fragmented, and so therefore is not able to offer the kind of robust opposition that one would normally expect from an opposition in Guyana. The second thing it's banking on is the media. It is banking on a media that has refused to put this government under the kind of scrutiny that they put other previous governments under. This government for 1 year has had absolutely no scrutiny from the mainstream media. We have 4 daily newspapers, none of them has put this government under the kind of scrutiny. I'm not saying that here and there you would not see a little criticism here, a little criticism there. But the kind of scrutiny that they put the coalition under, the kind of scrutiny that they put the previous PPP under, the previous PPP government, they've not put this government under that scrutiny. And when you have a media that is not or are not, a media that are not putting the government under scrutiny, then we're going to have a government that is unaccountable. So the PPP government does not believe that it's accountable to the opposition, because the opposition is in disarray. It does not believe it's accountable to the media, because the media have decided not to scrutinize this government. And here is the reason why. The media turned on the coalition very early. Stabrook News, Skytro News, Guyana Times, of course, some of the other unconventional media, they turned on the coalition for different reasons. And after the no confidence vote, they showed their hands. They adopted the narrative of the PPP. They gave the PPP cover. They justified everything the PPP did from the no confidence vote in December 2018 up until 2020. And during the 5-month impasse, I've never seen a media fraternity behave so shameless. I was a columnist for one of those newspapers, as you know. And I had to pull my column because basically I was not wanted anymore, because I would not go along with the narrative that that newspaper was pushing. We would write columns and they would tell you, write another one. This one doesn't fit in with our policy. And the policy was that they accepted the PPP's narrative that the elections were rigged, or there were attempts to rig the election by the coalition, and that the PPP had won the election. And so, once the PPP got into government, they now could not change gear and criticize a government that they helped to put in power. This is the danger when the media, which is like, they call it the fourth estate, because it's like a fourth branch of government. I don't like to quote some of these leaders, but Jefferson said very early that a media that are not and media that are not playing the role of checks and balances on the government is undermining democracy. That is, the people's right to information is a very important aspect of democracy. And so we see the media in Guyana having helped to install the PPP in office, now cannot criticize that government because they will feel shame. Because what the government is doing, some of us told them that that is what they would do. And they all got into this nonsense about democracy. And now democracy is being violated in front of their faces and they're saying nothing. Some of them complaining that we said it will revise the oil contract, and the PPP has not revised the oil contract. The PPP allows Exxon and the other companies to do what they like. The PPP allows violation of our environment. The PPP nothing to reverse what the previous government did. And some of them are making small criticisms of that. But they can criticize until the cows come home if they do. The PPP is not going to interfere with the interests of foreign companies. That's the third thing I'm coming to. The PPP is banking on an opposition that is in disarray, a media that is not putting them under scrutiny, and thirdly, an international community that is also not holding this government accountable. Because like the media, the international community, bar none, all of them, from CARICOM to the OAS to the Commonwealth to the big powers, they all lined up to install the PPP in government. What was their return? They're looking after their economic interests as far as the big countries are concerned. CARICOM, they're looking after their own interests because they don't want to go against what America and Britain says because they fear that they would be squeezed. They also are looking to Guyana to help to bail them out of their economic problems. And so they felt that they could make a deal with the PPP. And now the PPP is in office. The foreign companies are having their way. We have businessmen from Trinidad and Barbados and so on flocking Guyana, getting benefits over Guyanese small business people. And so the international community is not going to rock the boat. I know some of you believe that when Biden came to power, that the American stance would change, and it has not, because that is not how American foreign policy operates. The Biden government does not see Guyana as being geopolitically strategic, and so therefore there's no drastic change in the foreign policy towards Guyana. Little things here and there, a little statement here, a congressman makes a statement. Maybe down the road, but not now. So the PPP is banking on a supportive international community. They're banking on a media that is toothless, thoughtless, unimaginative, partisan. And I say that I have friends in the media, in the established media. And I'm not talking to the individual reporter here. I'm talking about those who own and control the media houses. I'm not talking about the workers. Those who own and control. There were 3 newspapers, and now the Chronicle, which is state-owned, is now usurped by the government to all 4 newspapers. So it is against that background that I've concluded that the PPP will not cooperate with the government. And so when I hear government people say, we call on the government to do this, the government must give more information on the vaccine, the government must do this, because the government is not going to do anything, not at this point. The government will only shift gears if those 3 elements that I listed, if the opposition puts pressure on it, maximum pressure, if the media turns on them, and if the international community changes its stance, a combination of the 3 is what would shift the PPP. Calling on the PPP to do this, calling on the PPP to do that is not going to cut it. We have to stop that nonsense. What do we do then as an opposition? What do we do as an opposition when you have a government that is dogging and that does not respect the time-worn accountability? What do you do? Well, you must put pressure on that government using what you have at your disposal. And secondly, you have to begin to give leadership and parallel governance to your supporters where it's necessary. The opposition cannot spend the money because it doesn't have access to the treasury. I understand that. But let's take the COVID-19 situation. We have asked reasonably, we have asked that the opposition become part of the task force. That's a reasonable request. They're doing it in other parts of the Caribbean. Let's not go to the rest of the world. Jamaican politics are among the more drastic in our region. In Jamaica, they have something called garrison politics. You're a PNP, you can't go in a JLP area. And Jamaica, the prime minister's called in the opposition. Our neighbor in Trinidad have the same ethnic problems, but they find a way to have a national outlook. Our government has said no. It means that it doesn't care whether Black people die, because people are out there saying we're not taking the vaccine, and the only thing the government has come up with is to bully them to take it. It has not seen it fit to call in their representatives and say, let's find a way to get all of our people to be vaccinated or to be tested or to wear their mask or whatever is needed. So even something in which the lives of people of the nation are at risk, the PPP government is playing hardball. Even with that, you're risking the lives of people. People are dying every day. And yet, this government cannot do one reasonable thing of saying, let the opposition come in. I go back to the coalition. Walter Lawrence invited Frank Anthony to come and sit on the task force when she was Minister of Health. Of course, he didn't, because when they were in opposition, they were pushing the nonsense that COVID-19 is not serious and the government want to use COVID-19 to spend money on pet projects and to this and to that. And now they're in government. They're acting like bullies. So they can't a reasonable thing like that. What must the opposition do? I think the opposition should put together its own task force. You have the former minister of Foreign Affairs who was on this program. She's a medical doctor, Dr. Cummins. You have Dr. Van West Charles. They are members of the PNC. There are other experts in Guyana and outside of Guyana. Put together a task force. Why are you sitting there every day calling on the government to do this? Put together a task force. Give your people the information that you are asking the government to give them. Give them the information on COVID-19. You will do a damn better job than the government. Put together a task force that tries within its limitation to collect the necessary data that we need. The government is not giving data. Nothing stops an opposition task force from a limited standpoint, trying to see what data can be collected. That task force can give our people the kind of information that comes out of PAO and the World Health Organization. You have to serve your people. You are complaining that your people are ill-served, that the government is not doing this and do. Get off your butts and do it. You do have the expertise. The role of the opposition is not just to criticize. The role of the opposition is also to pick up the slack in your community when the government is not serving your community. The role of the opposition is to come up with alternative approaches and alternative policies. That's the least this opposition can do. There's a lot the opposition is not able to do because of the state that it finds itself in. Some of it is objective, some of it is subjective. But the least you can do is put a team of experts together to deal with this COVID-19 thing that the government is mismanaging. And I think the government is intentionally mismanaging this COVID-19 as a way of sticking it to the opposition community. I made that point. And I hope the opposition is hearing. You're crying to the government, begging the government to do this, do that, and they're not doing it. There are things that the opposition can do. There are things it can't do. But there are things that it can do. And that's one thing it can do. The price of food has gone up 14%. The cost of living 5.7%, I think. You know what effect that has on the household of poor people? The money, extra money that you got to take now to buy food, that money has to come from somewhere. It has to come from the rent. It has to come from clothing. It has to come from fixing the leak in the roof. It has to come from somewhere. This government, $18,000, $19,000 cannot pick up that slack. You all hear what I'm saying? This is serious. The government can claim that part of the rise in prices and the rise in the cost of living has to do with COVID. Part of it has to do with floods. But the government cannot put the responsibility of management of the situation on COVID and flood. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have Professor Clive Thomas on. And I'm going to try to get Professor Clive Thomas not just to explain what's going on as far as the economy is concerned, but to give us alternatives. The only thing the government has done thus far is to ease the taxes and the revenue that they would have gotten when people import things on the freight and so on. They've eased that with the understanding that having given the break to the businessmen, when the goods come in, the businessmen will lower the prices. Well, no, they have not. That is why the prices are so high. They've risen by 14%. So it means the government policy of putting money in the hands of the businessmen with the hope that that will bring down prices has not worked. What is your alternative, Mr. Opposition? You have economists like Thomas and Winston Jordan and Carl Greenwich, people of economists of high caliber. There's some young guns like Tarun, Kemraj, and so on. The economists. You have Maurice Odell and all these economists in Guyana. And you, Mr. Opposition, you can bring them together in a committee, in a think tank, and come up with an alternative. The government does not implement it. What you are showing your people is that you have an alternative government come to you tomorrow. This is what you will do. I'm having Professor Thomas on tomorrow night. And part of what we'll be talking about is an alternative. How do we get out of this mess? How do we get out of this mess? Do we know what is happening in poor households? They may not be crying out loud. There it is, the Guyana economy in big trouble, food prices rise by 14%, cost of living by 5.4%. It's not an easy situation. And I'm saying we in the opposition have to stop this nonsense of just complaining and criticizing and not putting alternative policies and measures and actions before our people. Man shall not live by bread alone. We cannot survive in Guyana by just criticizing alone. We have to criticize, we have to expose, but we have to put alternative on the table. Look, we all stood on the fence on this COVID thing. All of us, because we just didn't know how to deal with it. But by now, we should have a clear sense of how do we proceed. Aubrey Norton is coming here next week in a town hall meeting for 2 hours. You're backing him to be the leader of the PNC, which means that he could be the next president. And he has agreed to come next week, and you all are going to question him next week, Tuesday, in the town hall meeting for 2 hours. You're all going to go in the chat room, or whatever you call it, and you all are going to ask the questions and force him, and I hope he is listening and his people are listening, to come up with alternatives. If you don't start putting alternatives now, if power falls in your hand tomorrow, you will be in the same doo-doo. Education is shambles. The government doesn't know when to open school, when to close school. It has no policy. It from out to stand, flying from tree to tree. What is the alternative? I teach. There's a limitation to what you can do. When a student is sitting in his home or her home, in your bedroom, first of all, they can't turn on the camera because they're their home. They hair and comb, they're this and that. And you have to teach to a blank screen. As a teacher, I know that there's not much you can do. So yes, the homeschooling is a problem. Putting them in school is a problem if people are not vaccinated, they're not tested, they're not wearing masks. It's a problem. It's a dilemma. We criticize the PPP, but what is our alternative? So the challenge for us is to now move to the point of our own governance, a parallel governance. We are dealing with a government that is prepared to strangle the opposition, is prepared to spite the opposition community if we do not submit. That is very clear. They're prepared for us to die rather than bringing the opposition on board. And we cannot continue to just be saying, we call on the government to do this, and the government should do this, and the government should do that, and the government should do this, and the government is not doing zilch. And we don't feel that we have a role to play. We got to get our act together. Before I open the phones, my friend across the Guyana Times, Rafi Dev, this weekend, get on your all case because you all make fun of Mr. Irfan Ali and Mr. Jack Dio because they can't pronounce words properly. and they can't talk properly. And he says a racial thing is the PNC leading the people. He said to make fun of Indian people is a racial thing. So Ravi's an intelligent guy. Ravi understands the history. And Ravi, I understand, has to come to the defense of his people because, you know, I don't have a problem with that. I come to the defense of my people. But Ravi ought to know that making fun of the way people talk if they can't pronounce the word properly has very little, if anything, to do with race. It's more class. The black middle class people feel that I'm too loud, that Lincoln Lewis too loud, we're too country. And they must make fun of us. It's a class thing. If we had a black president talking like that and, you know, can't pronounce the word properly and so on, people will be making fun of him too. So I am not saying it is correct to make fun of a man if he can't pronounce the words properly and so on. I'm not saying that. I'm sensitive as a country boy to the way in which the manner in which we speak, we are sometimes judged by it. So I am not saying that you must make fun, but if I know, and let me tell you this is David Hinds. If I know I can't pronounce word properly, and I know that I can't talk properly and me upstairs and walking properly, nobody will encourage me to become president. He must know which limb for climb pan. So I am not saying it's right to make fun of the president, but he chose to become president in a country where people like the president to talk properly. And it has nothing to do with race. The black people that I know who said, "Why when Rupert Ryan opened me mouth, that Indian man just get me eating up out the yard, and he's an Indian." We are a people who like our leaders to know to talk properly. It's as simple as that, Rafi. It has nothing to do with race. Come on, Rafi. You know better than that. Don't try now, because we catch the PPP with racism, to try now to catch back with racism. He went back in the article to talk about how people would make fun of the way Jagan talk and so on. I remember in the 1950s, there was a class man, I'm trying to remember his name, he used to write a newsletter, referred to Sidney King, he used to call him as a country bull. This was a red-skinned black man referring to another black man as a country bull. So if people make fun of Dr. Jagan and the way he talks, it's a class thing. That's up in me village. You know, his parents were teachers. So they were, you know, the upper class people in the village. The lady tell me she shout out to him one Sunday afternoon at the television, say, "Hey, we countryman there." He turned and tell, "Oh, that man is too loud." You're too loud also means you aren't talking properly. We have to live with that because we live in a class society. And so Ravi is unfair to black people to say they're making fun of Irfan because he is Irfan. Let me call the man Irfan. Irfan. They're making fun of Irfan because he's an Indian. They're making fun of Jack Dio because he's an Indian. No. If we live in a class society, and we live in a society that even if you're not class, the view of Guyanese in general is that if you become a leader, you must be able to talk properly. I grew up in a village when them man put on the suit, the big nice felt hat, the fancy shoes, and they gone to a wedding, and you calling them to give speech. They're looking for the big words, even if they got to make up the words. We are a country like people who can talk. I am glad my daughter's getting married and that you all come out to this auspicious occasion, even if they can put in one big word. We live in a country in which people, you can talk. I go back in my village all the time, they pull me one side, David, like how you talk up on the TV. If I couldn't pronounce extrajudicial, they will pull me one side and tell me, you can walk on the ward. Why are they saying that it had to do with race? It had nothing to do with race. If Irfan know that he can't talk properly, why let Jackson them push him a fire? Why let them push him to become president? Then you're president, you can talk for your country. And you're dealing with a very hard place that the Caribbean language. I know many people didn't like Burnham, but I say, oh God, when you open me mouth for talk, you can't talk like him. People want their leaders to talk better than them. They want their leaders to be bright more than them. Unfortunately, that is the type of society that we're living in, for good or for ill. And so, no, Ravi, no, don't accuse Black people of racism. If I know the boy can't talk properly, not put the boy belly pump plimpa. Put the belly pump plimpa. And if he know that he can't talk properly, decline. They want them by other by take president thing. So there we are, my people. Right? I'm gonna open the phones now. 592-604-9722 and let you have your say on the issues that I've raised there today. And remember, like Thomas coming here tomorrow to talk economics, this cost of living thing, this prices, and what we got to do. All right? And next week, Aubrey, the prospective leader, a lot of y'all support him. He's coming here. Y'all gonna get a chance to talk to him one-on-one. I understand that people will have to get into the chat room, and there are limits to how many people. So maybe we'll ask people to give a little donation so that they can get into the chat room. And of course, people who cannot donate, somebody can take out a donation for somebody else, but we'll talk more about that. If not today, then on Thursday. On Thursday, I'm having Dr. Henry Jeffrey. We haven't had him on for a long time. And he coming on to talk on all things politics. So from now to next week is a big lineup. Thomas, tomorrow, Henry Jeffrey Thursday, and then the leadership candidate of the People's National Congress, Aubrey Norton, coming on. All right, let's open the phone and hear what you've got to say. The opposition alternative must expose the government's pro-business policies and put pressure on it to implement programs in a non-discriminative stimulus manner for the Guyanese working people. That's John. Very good. Yes, we have to expose and we have to put alternatives before them. We've got to put alternatives before them. The PPP haters don't like blacks educated and excellent.
You have a call in, Dr. Hinds.
All right. Yes, caller, you're on there.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, sister.
For the price to get into the chat with Mr. Norton. And on all the topics that you spoke on, they are very relevant. The thing with the fire, I had my house was destroyed by fire, one of them. And when the fire was over, I had to leave the building as the child remains as it was right there. And then the fire people came, the fire police came, the fire service came, and they checked it out and they gave me a report on what they thought happened or what they found out to have occurred causing the fire. It was only after then I could have removed the charred remains from the area. Unlike what happened at the police at breakdown. Now, the installed president was at a civic function, and he heard that his main police station in the country was on fire. And I think he left that function and putting it on hold to attend an emergency of the burning down of this police station. So he didn't have no time for the station as it was on fire. Then this man who said he pushed things through concrete, pushed things through, so you could see that the man like he's on drugs, because if you light a phone, you got to wait till the thing ignite. And could he have seen through? Because the cell hole, the windows in the cell does be higher. So I don't know if he could have seen through the cell to put things in mattress, and I don't know if there was that mattress in the cell, in the police lockup. Anyway, so that is a no-no. The other thing about cost of living, I could remember I asked the former Minister of Finance for him to tell us if the Guyana dollar has slide. And when you see how cost of living is going up in Guyana, at least it tells me, I don't know about nobody else, that the dollar has lost some of its power. Because if the dollar didn't lose its power, the same dollar was buying things last year and year before the last, buying the same things, and you got to put 50 cents more to the dollar. That means that the dollar has lost power. And once you hear that your country is engaging the assistance of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, it tells you that your dollar got to slide, because when they give you money, they take off some values off your dollar because you owe them money. So Guyana money has slide. But nobody is telling the people who got sense, not because I know. So I wouldn't jump up on all the cost of living because I know it's like. Anyway, the other thing about in front on this man who said, everybody know he's a dunce. If you know you can't call words, you didn't have a proper education, that is not Indian and black. Because as you rightly said, when old-time men go into wedding, the daughters getting married, they dress up to than 1,000 to look the good, and they had to have that big word. And most time was this auspicious occasion. Get some more to add into the phrase. So when you go to the wedding and you get the main speech from the father, the bride, you know you went to the wedding. And then there might got other men who go to the wedding too, who had this book. My father had a book, Speeches and Toasts, you know, the fancy book. And they would come and borrow this book from the father because they're preparing for proper speech. And we're coming back to that. If you got your children in your house and you don't teach them to speak, people would jump down on me on these programs that I always talking. We grew up, we were 7, and we grew up in a house. Sunday, my father was paid to a mother used to sew. But Sunday was the day when daddy was at home. And those days, we sat at the dining table for meals. And we were allowed to speak. Every child could have spoken and said something. So eventually, once you grow up in a home where you are allowed to speak, speaking in public will not come hard. And the last thing, if you didn't learn to read in school, you're not no proper reading, because in schools now, they are not really reading. Now they go to phonics. When you get big, teacher used to beat you. I had a teacher that gave dictation. The time was dictation. They gave me something and the big word was together. And I couldn't spell this word. You see me back? When they say I go home the day, I got to lie down on it. And she told me, she said, spell together. I can't spell it. She said, two. I spelled T-O. She said, get. I said, G-T. She said, or. I said, H-R. That is the word. Until I old and gray at 60. That was way back when I was in primary 2. So study the age them there. And I strictly spelled that word. No matter how big I write the next so. So the thing is it. No proper upbringing, no proper reading would end up to have the thing what we had outside. And everybody is ashamed to know that that's the quality of educational stand that the president has. Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much for your comments. And your first, there's another caller. Come right on.
Not yet, Doc. Proceed.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much for your comments. And you were asking about to get into the chat room. I will leave it to people to make a donation to the program because we're going to be rebroadcasting the town hall meeting on broadcast television on Channel 9 and maybe on another channel. So any contribution would help. So you can make a contribution, of course, through PayPal or Cash App. The information will be put there on the screen. Are there any other caller? It doesn't seem as though.
There's a caller, Doc.
Yeah.
Good evening, Dr. Hinds, and good evening, everyone in the diaspora. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. I think you were in great form tonight, but you were also very relevant and substantive. Now, the Constitution is replete or is full of statutory statements that say over and over again, the people must be involved in the process. And this is why they have so many articles of the Constitution that pertain to the people playing an intricate role in the facilitation of democracy. So I don't know how in heaven's name can the government try to scuttle and cover up a democratic process as it relates to the Brick Dam situation and other situations. So just for Nandalal to be listening, let him know that it's a mockery of him and them to have a constitution that is so replete telling the world, hey, the people must be involved. The people must know. And then you're denying the process of investigating the fire, and you're trying to cover up, and you're trying to circumvent, and you're trying to stifle the democratic process and the checks and balances. So, we just want people to know that. Secondly, I want to say this here. Dr. Hinds, you started something a while ago about African dignity. I wanted to contribute, or I wanted to say that the energy that we have here tonight, can we help you in some way? Because we have everything at our fingertips. A cell phone. We're enthused. We are moved by what was said here tonight. Can we take that enthusiasm and say, let's support Dr. Hinds as an organizer to create a movement of people, 100,000 to 200,000 in the diaspora and in Guyana. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, you don't got to be old, you don't got to be young, anybody qualify. Call someone, tell someone. Let's start an additional movement. In addition to what Rickford Bork is doing, let's create a parallel movement that will create the interest on the ground in Guyana as well as in the diaspora in Canada, UK, and the United States. What can we do tonight? We have a simple phone. We can WhatsApp and call, say, hey, I like to pledge my support. I may not be able to give $100, but I can give my support to say, I dare with y'all. I'm going to call my family in Linden. I'm going to call my family in Bartico. I'm going to call my family in West Coast Province. Are we going to walk towards this thing the same way we just plan towards Christmas holiday? What can we do? I know people are listening to the show tonight and say, this is overboard. Okay, if it's overboard, what can we do to take it the next step, to be the change that we seek? How can we become that change? What can we do, Dr. Hinds, to work with you to build 100,000 strong in Guyana to 200,000 strong across the diaspora, to challenge the PPP? And that includes grandmothers, and that includes young people. What can we do? Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your contribution, and you have thrown out your proposal, and it's up to the people to move on the proposal if they think that it's a worthwhile proposal. You know, my view is that all of us have to make our contribution. There are other leaders out there. Aubrey Norton is coming here. You know, he's put his hands up and says, I want to be the leader of the PNC. I am prepared, even though I don't belong to the PNC, to give him as much exposure for him to say to us what he wants to do, because I think he has a contribution to make. We all of us, in whatever little ways, have our contribution to make. I know my own limitations, but I also know that there are things that I can contribute. So I'm always at the service of the struggle and the revolution. Good night. Desiree from London. Well, not London, England. I don't know if you're quite in London. And it's late there. Thanks for staying up with us. Donna, I always forget to mention French Guyana. When I say little by yourself, you say, when a lady goes, she gonna Cayenne, right? Until I became a teenager, I realized Cayenne was part of French Guyana. But yes, I always forget to mention French Guyana and Suriname. There a lot of our people are. Thanks, Donna, for joining us.
Hi. We have a caller.
Good evening.
Go ahead,
Good
caller.
evening.
Hi, good evening. Dr. Hinds.
Good night.
Dr. Hinds.
Yes.
contribution is. They're claiming that this man, Green, confessed that he was in the lockup and he burned the station down. For persons who work in that compound and who know the compound and who regularly visit the compound will know the station is under the flat now. And that area, no part of it was damaged with the fire. And it is impossible for that man to reach records and burn that area. Was he under police watch? Was he locked up? How did he get there? There are so many questions that Guyanese need answers to. Thank you.
Yes, and I didn't even go there because I didn't even go to the point of whether the man is right. My point tonight was that the president, without an investigation, pointed finger at opposition people. All right? And I'm saying that if you're saying opposition people burn down this place without an investigation, you are influencing the investigation as president, and that you have a plan for when these things happen to pin the opposition leader. Whether the man who say they will figure that investigation. All right, absolutely no to accuse without an investigation. All right. I think we're coming down to program time unless absolutely. Is there a call coming through there? Unless there's absolutely no.
We got a call.
It's been. Oh, there is one. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Hello? Hey.
Yes, you're on.
Hi. Hi.
Yes,
Good
go ahead.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. We seem to be having some problems there with that caller. Apparently, she's not coming through. So as we close off tonight, tomorrow, Professor Thomas on for us to talk about the economic situation. Where are we going with this high cost of living, high price, its impact on poor people who often get forgotten. We talk about local content, we talk about this, we talk about that, we don't talk about poor people. Poor people, what the impact on poor households? And how do we go forward? How do we get ourselves out of this mess, part of which was caused by the COVID, part of which was caused by the floods? How do we get ourselves out of this? There must be another way other than just giving money to those who are importing things and to relax the duty on the things they're bringing in with the hope that they would lower the price on poor people. You know, it's not happening. So Professor Thomas is here tomorrow evening. On Thursday evening, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, he has not been on for a long time. And we're going to be talking everything and anything on politics with Dr. Jeffrey. And then next Tuesday for 2 hours, Aubrey Norton will be here on the town hall meeting, and you all will get a chance to question him, to get in as many questions as you can. As I said, you will have to get into the chat room, and any contribution will do. Any contribution, any donation will do for you to get in to the chat room, to have a front seat, to ask Aubrey questions. You can send your donation, of course, to Cash App and There we go. WhatsApp us down today. Cash App and PayPal. And there are people who are not going to be able to afford a donation. And those of you who can afford a donation, you can make a donation for somebody else to get into the room. And we'll make sure that everyone who can get in, so that we can get as many questions and a variety of questions to Aubrey Norton. So that's next Tuesday. And we'll be reminding you of it throughout the week. Have a good evening. I hope what I said tonight resonated with you, and that we're going to start pushing as much as we can to begin to do things differently. Thank you. Good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhinds6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.